All right, welcome everybody to It's Happening with Velshi and Rule. I'm Velshi. That's not Rule. That is Justin Wolfers. Stephanie's off today. She and I, Justin, welcome. First of all, big welcome to you. Nice to have you here. Justin is an economist. He's a professor of economics at the University of Michigan, and he's written this great book that we all need, whether you know nothing about economics or a lot about economics. He loves to explain stuff, so it's a perfect match for us on the show. So I'm really happy that you're here. Thank you for that. B, remarkable timing, but literally moments ago. Oh, by the way, let me remind everybody, we take your questions in the chat, and you can still email us questions at velshirule@ms.now, velshirule@ms.now. Anything you want about economics, politics, the intersection of those two. Justin, I will admit to our viewers, I'm the news guy here, you're the economist, but you just broke an important piece of economic news to me moments ago, so I'm not going to take the credit for it. Tell us what just happened.
All right. So Kevin Warsh was just got through Senate confirmation as our next Fed chair. He got through easily, party line vote with, of course, Fetterman voting as a Republican.
As he often does.
Yes.
John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, very confusing fellow, was a progressive Democrat and now mostly sides with Republicans.
We all have interesting stories. So happy new Fed Chair Day to you, Ali. I know it's like it's probably not quite as good as your birthday. Maybe it's better.
No, but it's a big deal for those of us who follow economics. It's a big deal. There haven't been a lot of Fed chairs. Generally, they serve 10-year terms, and I would argue that they are at some point in that 10 years, possibly one of the most powerful people on earth.
There's a saying we used to use in the Greenspan era, the second most powerful man on earth. And I'm glad we've got this footage going because you can see why the president chose him. The president said he came from central casting, and baby, that is handsome Kevin. There's two Kevins in the White House economics team. That's handsome Kevin. You can see how he got that moniker. And he is not to be confused with Happy Kevin, who smiles whenever he lies and lies whenever he smiles.
Kevin Hassett.
Yes.
So let me ask you about this Kevin Warsh. On paper, if you're a Martian and you show up on paper and say, who is it who leads your central bank? And you see his resume, pretty good. Like he checks all the boxes. I'm a little alarmed because during his confirmation hearing, he got asked not a difficult question. It wasn't an economic question. It was just a simple question to test that Elizabeth Warren asked him, largely to test whether he would maintain the independence of the Fed. One of the biggest and most important things about the Central Bank of the United States is that it is independent of policymaking. It's why the terms don't match presidential terms. They should do what's right as opposed to what the president wants them to do for political reasons. She just asked him who won the election of 2020. Couldn't provide an answer to that.
I mean, to be fair to handsome Kevin, it was a long time ago. I can't remember back that far either. Look, and that gets to, I think, the most important thing. You're right to say, yes, they just announced Kevin Warsh as the next Fed chair, but actually they haven't announced the most important thing, which is which Kevin Warsh.
Right.
Because there's at least two Kevin Warshes running around Washington. There's a fellow by the name of Kevin Warsh who is devastatingly handsome, who was a member of the Federal Reserve Board between 2006 and 2011. That Kevin Warsh, through that entire period where inflation was too low, the recovery was too slow, the US was more at a risk of deflation after the financial crisis than of anything else. That Kevin Warsh, everywhere he'd look, he'd see inflation and be scared and worried, even though it wasn't anywhere to be seen. That Kevin Warsh was what economists call an inflation hawk. Someone who's less worried about the fact that unemployment remained high and remained too high for too long during that economic recovery, and more terrified that inflation might start. Some people even call these folks inflation nutters. That's what the Brits call them. That Kevin Warsh, who, by the way, has the same birth certificate as the bloke who turned up at the Senate confirmation, who was appointed by a president who said he wants someone who believes in low interest rates, who will cut interest rates to 1%, even though we're currently at a moment of nearly 4% inflation.
Right.
This was a Kevin Warsh. The bloke who turned up at this Senate confirmation claims to care a lot about Fed independence. And I want to make clear what that is. You were wonderfully clear, Ali. Fed independence is I'm going to serve the American people because that's what the Federal Reserve Act told me what to do, versus I'm going to serve the president's private political interests. You don't actually get a choice. The law tells you what to do.
Right.
The law says you've got to look at the data and figure out what's best for America and shut the president's political views out.
Right.
That's what got Jay Powell in a lot of trouble.
Yep. Jay Powell, by the way, a Republican, appointed as the chair of the Federal Reserve by President Trump. He keeps claiming it was Joe Biden. It wasn't. Joe Biden got appointed to the board. He was appointed as chair by Donald Trump to replace a Fed chair who hadn't finished her term. So Powell was Trump's
Janet
choice.
finished her term. Finished her term. So Janet Yellen was the previous Fed chair, but there had been a long norm through the past half dozen presidents or so that if someone's in the middle of their term, if someone is serving, to appoint them for another term. The term as Fed chair is 4 years. You appoint them again if they're doing a good enough job. Janet was doing a terrific job. Donald Trump, I know this will surprise you, looked at a short woman from Brooklyn with a Brooklyn accent and said, even though she's done a splendid job with the economy's in good hands. She's not from central casting. So he quite literally had this conversation. It's deja vu all over again. He's like, I want someone from central casting. Jay Powell has that handsome grey hair. He was really hot for grey hair back then. And so literally we appointed the next Fed chair based on his, for Jay Powell, it wasn't boyish good looks, it was distinguished good looks.
Right.
Turns out Jay was terrific. Fantastic. So maybe there's something to appointing a bloke based on their looks. But then the president very quickly soured on him. A lot of crushes do when you're in high school. And so then he decided what we wanted was boyish good looks rather than distinguished good looks. So we got rid of grey-haired Jay for the boyishly handsome Kevin. If this sounds like we're not talking about economics, we're talking about soap opera, I can't help you. They've become inextricably linked.
Because literally the work that gets done at the Federal Reserve is, boy, that's some wonky stuff. I mean, they've got like dots and plots and charts, and they really study stuff. And it's a model for central banks around the world, right? Every country has a central bank. The UK, Canada, Japan, all of them have central banks. And those that maintain independence from their political system tend to come to similar conclusions and do similar things there, and they should be quite boring. So if our viewers right now don't know what we're talking about, that's generally good. You don't need to know, right?
Yep.
There are countries where that doesn't happen. Turkey has intervened, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina. Guess what? They all have something in common, right? These are not really stable places where the currency people don't trust as much because they don't believe that those central banks are working independently. That is so central to the strength of the U.S. dollar and the sense of America as a reliable country.
Yep. So, look, very simple story is if economics starts to sound like soap opera, you're doing it wrong. Keynes once said he wanted economists to be as boring as, I believe it was dentists, but it may have been plumbers. I think it was dentists. And he's absolutely right, which is if you can just go about your life and pick up your kids from school and make a delicious dinner and go for a swim, what a glorious, marvelous world that is.
Yep.
Because if you're thinking about economics, it's that you're worried that inflation's too high and you've got to take that wheelbarrow of money and spend it before it becomes worthless. It's that you're worried about losing your job. You're worried about the dollar being devalued. You're worried about a financial crisis. There's no one who ever said, I want to spend more of my life thinking about and worrying about these economic issues. And so, it's much better when we're dull.
But it's wild because that's what we talk about now. Everybody talks about it because you know what? Inflation, there's no way to gaslight people about it. You can't tell people their gas is cheaper when it's more expensive. So I want to talk to you about this.
Never say never. The president just said we're suffering through fake inflation. You can gaslight people.
So let's look at a few examples of this. I'm just going to try and pick one here. Well, let's look at, we have a full screen. It's number 4, Christina. It's energy prices, okay? This is the one that hits everybody. Gasoline prices are up. This was as of March, by the way. These numbers are out of date at this point because they've gone up so much since March. But as of March, they were up 20%, the beginning of the Iran war, up 20% year over year. Fuel oil was up 44%. Since then, gasoline has caught up. So we're up about 50% on gas prices. It doesn't matter whether you drive. I don't know what you drive and whether you drive, but some people have. I think you told me you got an electric car, in fact, recently.
I recommend it, mate. It's terrific.
So, but even if you don't drive at all, this thing oil energy prices affect your life because farms use diesel. Everybody who transports everything uses diesel. Airplanes use fuel. You buy a lot of stuff from overseas that come on airplanes and then on trucks. Food preparation uses energy. Putting aside the fertilizer, which is its own problem from the Strait of Hormuz, there's nobody who's not affected by higher energy prices. Like I just literally can't imagine anyone whose life in America is not affected by higher energy prices, whether or not you drive.
Absolutely. So, yes, yes, everything you just said's right. But when people think about about rising oil prices, they really think about the 1970s. In the 1970s, it really was a crisis. A very similar thing, trouble in the Middle East, led to restricted trade of oil, which caused the price of oil to skyrocket. The specific politics are different, but the basic mechanics are remarkably similar.
Yeah.
That led to two things that we didn't realize before that could occur at the same time. A stagnating economy. We didn't have as much oil, so we couldn't run the machines and all of that.
There was actually a shortage at that point in America. We don't have that today.
Right. And we saw prices go up.
Yeah.
Inflation. So we had stagnation and inflation. If both those things are happening at the same time, wouldn't you wish there was just one ugly word that jams them both together? What would that word be?
Stagflation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in the 70s. I want to make the case that it's not quite the right script to think about this time. Really, two things happened. The first is the US economy over time has become remarkably less energy dependent.
Right.
It is still true that everything you said, that it's one of our most important inputs and it pervades societies in ways that you would just never imagine. All of that's true, but less true than that back then.
Right.
And the easy way to think about that is to think that farming and manufacturing and stuff that needs fuel was a big part of the economy. And today we're a service sector. We're predominantly a service economy. And we've got enormous improvements in fuel efficiency and things like that. And so the amount of oil per pound of GDP has gone down a lot. So we're much less dependent. And the other is that as a result of that, partly, the US now is roughly energy independent. We basically make as much oil as we use, but that doesn't fully insulate us, as we're all learning right now.
So when we talk about inflation, there are actually various measures of it, various ways of doing it. We have had an inflation measure that has just come out, and it's the Producer Price Index, the PPI, and then there's the CPI. And within that, there are the headline numbers and the core numbers. The PPI is the one we've got now, the Producer Price Index. Can you tell us in the most basic terms for folks who have never taken an economics course and never will and never want to, what does that mean?
I just want to be clear, Ali. I mean the following as a compliment. My word, I might be about to be out-nerded.
That was pretty nerdy even for me.
He's trying to figure out his favourite of all the price indices, and we haven't even gotten into the PCE deflator, the GDP deflator. Oh, goodness gracious me, there's going to be so much fun. People are tuning out as we speak. But you and I are here. Okay, look, the Consumer Price Index measures the cost of living. That's what it's all about, just rose 3.8%. You can think about the economy as involving lots of stages of production. You pick the wheat, then you bake the bread, and then you make sandwiches, and then I buy the sandwich. The Producer Price Index, so let me go back actually. Consumer Price Index, consumer means it's the price of stuff consumers buy.
Right.
Producer Price Index, the hint's right there, it's the price of stuff producers buy. So my local deli buys bread to make my sandwich. And so it's earlier stages of production.
Right.
And so if you see producer prices rising, if my deli starts having to pay more for its bread, well, it's actually going to be paying more.
There's a choice. They can decide not to raise prices, so they think they'll go down next week or whatever, or they can say, it's what we pay for bread, you have to pay a premium for bread too.
Exactly. So this is where you can see future price pressures starting to loom further back, higher up in the production chain.
So, like oil prices, I like oil prices to gas prices because generally speaking, there's no glitch there. If oil prices go up 50%, your gas prices are probably going to go up 50%. Tell me about the link between Producer Price Index, your deli paying more for bread, and what you will pay. If the Producer Price Index wholesale inflation goes up, does that mean retail inflation will go up?
Typically, yes. So I want to go back because you actually said something really deep and you made it sound really simple. So folks at home, we're used to paying for gas. Pull into the gas station, the numbers are 6 foot tall, and now they're getting really big.
Yeah.
But on the news, we read a lot about oil, and oil is only one input into gas. What you just said is, and so when you read or see news about oil markets, and none of us are out there buying West Texas Intermediate. That, by the way, is
in barrels, yeah.
Right. It's my favorite flavor. It's delicious.
Sweet. It's light and sweet.
Oh, nice. I love it. Much better than that Brent stuff. So as a basic rule of thumb, if you see on the news oil prices are going up 10%, you can expect gas prices to go up 10%. It's not going to happen the next day, but it will happen within a couple of weeks.
Right.
And early on, for instance, in this war, that rule of thumb you just gave us, Ali, was really helpful because what had happened is oil prices shot right up, and folks like you were calling me and they were saying, what's going to happen to gas prices? I'm like, got this crazy rule of thumb for you. It's eventually going to feed through.
Right,
okay?
and it did.
Yeah. Now, and that's because oil is basically the key ingredient in making gasoline. With producer prices, you're absolutely right. If my deli pays more for bread, either its profits can fall or you can pass it on and my sandwich price goes up.
Right.
If the price of bread is going to rise and stay high effectively forever, delis can't get by with lower profit margins. So anything that raises producer prices in an enduring way will end up raising sandwich prices. And to be clear, this is a metaphor for the whole economy.
Right.
And it will do so one for one, just the way gas and oil worked. Now, it doesn't always work like that in practice because sometimes the bread price goes up and the bread price comes back down.
Right.
And my deli's like, oh, do I really want to annoy my customers by changing prices all the time?
Right.
And
or
that's
if you're
why
big, if you're like a massive company, you might say, I can absorb this, or I can cut prices elsewhere, or whatever. I don't want to lose my customers. But your deli is not a massive company; they don't have influence. In fact, Christina tells me we've got a question about this. I want to just take a look
about the producer price index. You have an amazing audience.
So here we go. How does the market continue to rise? This is great question. I'm really glad for this. It's from Big Bank Fella. In the chat. How does the market continue to rise despite hot PPI and CPI numbers? That's an excellent question. And we'll get to it a few times through the course of the show because I want to talk a little bit about the K-shaped economy. But let's just ask that basic question. We've got inflation. It's relatively persistent and it's been exacerbated by both tariffs and this war in Iran. And yet, let's go back to those Martians. If they landed on Earth and said, show me your stock market, they'd say, oh my God, this is amazing. You guys are doing so well. Record after record after record.
No, you need more sophisticated Martians, mate. So you're right. A simplistic Martian, which, by the way, is what a lot of the current White House rhetoric says the stock market's at an all-time high.
Yes, they say it in answer to no matter what you ask them. That tends to be the answer.
Remember Pam Bondi? What was she talking about?
She talked about Epstein victims, and she talked about the stock market.
I have often thought that sexual trauma and the Dow Jones were closely related. So thanks, Pam. Sorry, I forgot I'm in America. I have to tell people when I'm being sarcastic.
We get it.
I don't actually really thank Pam Bondi for that. You hear, right, so first thing I want to point out, stock markets tend to rise. You look at any graph, they rise over time.
Over time, they tend to rise, yes.
And what's normally happens is the president is focused on governing and legislation, and he or she's really busy. It's been he so far, but, and they care about the broader wealth of the American people than a narrow stock market gauge, and so they just don't talk about it. But if you look at the number of times the stock market hit record highs under any president, it's literally hundreds of times. The only thing that's different right now is the information age that we're in, which is every time it happens, the president declares immense success.
Yeah.
The second part of this is, why is the stock market high? And this is where just always be careful about any explanation that has only one factor going on.
Right.
So the idea that there's just one economy, one thing, that's the whole thing. Look, here's a very simple story, which is right now you think probably stocks have got a lot to do with fear about the war, some fears left over about the trade war, some optimism about AI, positive earnings reports, blah, 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 a whole lot of things. The fact that the stock market is at an all-time high does not mean the stock market loves the war, for instance, or it doesn't mean that it loves the trade war. If what you want to do here's a trick. If what you want to do is figure out, does the stock market like some particular news development, what you do is you zero in and you look at how it responds in a very narrow period of time when that's the only thing that happens.
Right.
So if Trump gives a speech that says, or tweets out, I am going to destroy another country and wipe it from the face of the earth, you can compare what happens in the market just around that period of time, because during that period of time there was no AI news, there was no earnings news, it's just a narrow period of time.
Right.
If you want to get super nerdy, that's what financial economists call an event study. Now, it turns out if you do that over the past few weeks, every single time the president has leaned into his belligerence, the US stock market has fallen.
Right.
Every time it looks like he's going to taco, Trump always chickens out. Every time it looks like he might backtrack, every time it looks like the P stubs are out, stocks rise.
Right.
By the way, so what you learn from that is traders are trading as if they believe the value of stocks is higher if we don't go to war than if we do. By the way, we saw the same thing during the trade war. I don't know.
Yes. Every time he said he was pulling back on stuff, stock market goes up. Every time he throws out one of those insults that I don't like this country, so we're going to double their tariffs, you got a problem in the stock market.
Yeah, so
and the bond market.
Yours and my relationship, it just feels like a slow motion replay. We spent all of 2025 watching the ups and downs due to a misguided policy that markets hated.
Yes.
That still often led the overall market was still all right.
Yeah.
And now we're spending 2026 watching the ups and downs of mistaken policy that the market hates.
Yeah. 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 So the market is, and we'll talk about this when we talk about K-shaped economy, but because I have a professor here who actually talks to young people all the time, we have a very relevant question from a young person. Let's play it.
To understand the economy.
Oh, we missed the beginning of that, but
what can I do as a young person to understand the economy?
Oh,
boom.
Wow. Ready?
Yeah.
Come take Economics 101 at the University of Michigan, and I've got a book for you. No, better than that, I just started a new media company, Platypus Economics, that's all about teaching you. Mate, did you mean for me to take that as a self-promo or not?
Oh, you're welcome to. As long as people can figure out the economy, because it's not a naturally occurring thing for people to want to do, right? It's not the elective that, people are looking to fill out their curriculum. Let me take an economics course.
I mean, they should.
But you're going to spend your life thinking about, one way or other, you're going to spend your life making economic decisions every single day. The beauty of our economy, whether it works or not for everybody all the time, is that it is based on people's economic decisions, right? There's a expression out there that 2/3 of our economy is driven by economic decisions. Some of that's true and some of that's not true, because it's not a decision as to whether you get to pay rent or pay for transportation or whatever the case is, but where you pay rent, where you live, how you get to work. These are economic choices that we make every day, whether you like or understand economics or not.
You, my friend, I hope you're shopping for compliments, because I'm full of them today. That is a very sophisticated understanding of economics, and it's why you break through. Let me go back and tell you the bad way of teaching it, and that might be informing her question. The way many people teach economics is there's this thing out there called the economy, and my students, they're up in the cheap seats watching the game play out.
Right.
Right. And anytime someone uses the economy as if it's a third person, that's sort of what they're doing. That's not the reality. The reality is that every single person who's in our audience right now, you are making economic decisions. You are an economic actor. You're on the playing field. So you are deciding how much to spend versus save. You're deciding whether to go to college versus not go to college. You're deciding whether to buy a car or to take rideshare, whether to buy a house or whether to rent. You're deciding whether to invest in going to the gym. Well, investing in going to the gym, that's an investment in your future, the same way that a company investing in a new factory is about their future. It's all economics. And so the best antidote to people not caring is actually helping them see how they are economic actors.
Right. You do this every day.
And I think of economics as a superpower. It's a cape you can put on to see the world more clearly. Look at those handsome glasses of yours there, Ali.
Thank you.
They help you see the world more clearly. Well, when I teach Economics 101, I help my students see the world more clearly. And so in answer to that person's question, look, come and take Econ 101 at the University of Michigan, follow us on Platypus Economics. But more to the point, the question is the answer. The most important thing is to understand that you will make better choices in every aspect of your life if you come to learn to see through and see the clarity that one can get understanding economics.
So the best tie between people and the economy to describe what you're saying, that we're not in the cheap seats looking down, is this remarkable index that comes from the University of Michigan. I think it's been put out there since the early 1950s, and it's the Consumer Sentiment Index. Now, there are a couple of measures out there about consumer sentiment, but this is the gold standard. There we go. Thank you
for you there, mate.
I appreciate that. And this is the consumer. Now, we're not going all that far back. We're just going back to 2016, right? Donald Trump's first term. But if you go back to 2050, to 1952 or whatever it is, you will not see a number lower than where we are on that index. And the reason this is so telling is it's just questions that the University of Michigan asks people about how they feel about the economy. And for some reason, it's interesting because the economy isn't, like you said, stock market's up, GDP is strong. People are feeling worse about the economy, according to this measure, than they have felt in 75 years.
Yeah. So first of all, Ali, I'm going to take this up for a reason you may not understand, which is it makes my hair look bad.
I see. Okay, well, not a problem, my face.
Yeah. Okay. What you just said is actually stunning, right? We have a continuous measure of how people feel about the state of the economy. And according to this index, it's worse than they've ever been in the entire post-war period. Wow.
Yeah, that's something.
And so there are two ways forward here. One is we either take it seriously. We say, well, that told us the truth. We need to interrogate the why, that people really do feel that way. Or you say, that's a measure, but is it measuring what you think it's measuring? If I were a partisan, I would definitely take the first path and I'd say Trump has destroyed everything about the economy. This is horrible. But I'm more of a nerd, and I'm not sure this is measuring what we think it's measuring anymore. Let me try and explain. So for the first 50 years of that survey, by the way, I don't run the survey, but for the first 50 years of that survey, if you asked people how they felt the economy was going or how they felt about the future of the economy, they would answer based on how they thought about the future of the economy. And so whether you're a Democrat or a Republican was basically uncorrelated with your answer. And what's happened over the last decade, and you can almost date this to 2015 and the Golden Escalator, is we have all of us come to see the world through such intensely partisan eyes.
Right.
That it's actually changed how people answer these questions.
Oh,
and so now it turns out that your partisanship predicts your answer to this question to a degree we'd never seen before in US history. And it's actually quite striking, which is Republicans thought the economy was horrible in 2015, fantastic from 2016 to 2019, terrible from 2020 to 24, and it's magnificent once again. Huh. And these swings are utterly enormous. And so I think my colleagues who run that survey don't love me saying this, but I think increasingly what we're measuring is people are answering the question, do you like the president, when we're asking them, do you like the economy?
Right.
And that means we need to be
interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. However, if you think back to the tough times during our lifetime, or at least our working lifetimes, right? Look, go back to 2008, the financial crisis, go back to the pandemic, when times were measurably very, very difficult in the economy.
Right.
There was a sense. You may not have agreed with what Obama did during the financial crisis, or what Biden did, or what Trump did during the pandemic, but there was generally speaking a sense that your government was generally speaking on your side, regardless of their politics. That they were working, the nerds in the government, the economists and the Fed were all working toward fixing this problem with you. Now, whether that's partisan or not today, or a symptom of what you just talked about, there isn't necessarily that feeling. So if tariffs and the war in Iran are affecting your life, these are not exogenous things that happen to us. They're not a pandemic. They're not a global economic crisis. Right. They're actually both policy decisions. So right. A lot of people out there would reasonably say, my government may have done this to me.
That's right. And so they're angry. And so that's where now I want to draw a distinction here. If the question is, how is the economy, or how is the future of the economy? Like folks from the right want to say it's great, folks from the left want to say it's terrible. The answer is it's in between. And I don't mean to be soft and mushy, but the reality is we've got unemployment at 4 point something. that's worse than it could be and better than it typically is. And that's the truth.
Well, remember, you and I years ago used to think that we used to describe 5% as full employment. Right?
Yeah.
There was some sense that
Incredible.
5% of the people are always in churn. They're moving. They're going back to school. They're marrying a billionaire. They're robbing banks. They don't need to work. Whatever the case is. We've been below 5% for some time.
Right.
Generally speaking, that results in higher wages, which it also has to some degree. But I don't know if it's both things or is it two different things, right? Is it two different economies or are both things be true?
Trying to tie this to consumer sentiment, the reality of the economy, I know that there are some people watching right now who are doing it tough or have friends or family who are doing it tough, and they are, but that's always a painful case in the United States. And so the question is, are there more people right now? And certainly more than they want, but it's not like during the depths of COVID and it's not like the depths of the financial crisis. But if instead people are thinking about, and this is your point, Ali, what do I think about the quality of economic policy? What do I think about the fact that this didn't just happen to us, that there was a new virus that went around the world, but was smacked in the face by our own president who refuses to understand introductory economics? Hell yeah, I'm mad. I just want to be careful, though. That's saying there that consumer confidence is measuring anger at the White House about economic policy rather than economic outcomes.
That's a very interesting point. That said, if we're all economic players, I wonder how that influences my thinking, right? Am I, because I'm mad at the president, will I not buy a new mattress or a new dishwasher or a new car or go out to dinner? It's an interesting concept. I will say a reporter asked the president about this conflict, right? Particularly as it relates to the war in Iran and the effect on the economy. I want to play this and then I want to play some reaction to it. Let's play what Donald Trump had to say about the economy. This is Donald Trump asking about the financial situation of Americans.
When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that motivates.
Tell me what you think about that.
I'm going to come out and surprise you.
All right.
It's possible. Look, I don't think what he said is terrible. And from the right president, I would think it's noble. From this bloke, who the hell knows what the connection between words, thoughts, and feelings are. Let me explain why, though. The question that he was asked is not, do you care about the financial situation of Americans? The question he was asked is,
to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you?
When you are negotiating with Iran.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I am someone who happens to think the economics, the politics, the morality, and the ethics of war are enormous. That the stakes involved are huge, and they basically dwarf paying an extra few bucks at the pump. If there's a case for bombing Iran, and there was a huge if there, I just want to put that there, right? I don't buy the if, but if there is, either because you think what you're going to do is liberate 90 million people from tyrants, or because you think that a country is on the cusp of a nuclear weapon and could obliterate the United States, 330 million people, the stakes there are so high that how much extra you or I pay for gas isn't going to make a difference. So it's roughly correct that you should roughly ignore that and keep your eye on the stuff that really, really matters. Let me say it another way. Should we have killed the Nazis? Yes.
Right.
Should we have done it irrespective of what it did to gas prices? Yes. Now, you could say, well, Justin, the Nazis were really bad guys, or Iran bad guys. Totally open, right? I'm not saying this war is justified at all, but I'm saying that the stakes involved are so much higher. Yeah.
Okay,
it's worth a couple of bucks at the pump.
Our colleague Alex Tabbitt, who travels all around the country, but he works a lot out of Florida. He then put this comment that the president made about the economy to some people at a gas station. Let's hear what they had to say.
When you have no idea what it's like to actually have to work for $1. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Of course, the American pockets don't mean anything to you.
He doesn't care about our situation. He doesn't. He's just here for pride and ego. He's not lying, and he proves it. Not only that, but also like food stamps and other stuff. He does not care about our financial situation. He cares about giving himself a name. And he just proved it.
He don't care about the people, but that's the whole point. You're being in office. The people voted for you. He's not a people person at all. He's in there for the money, for his pockets, not us. He's not there for us at all.
So you made an interesting point. If I don't get why we're in this war, and a lot of people don't get why we're in this war. A lot of people don't support this war. A lot of people don't have not had a good explanation for it. But if there were a good explanation, and if we were there and we were supportive of this war, I get that. We're not finding a lot of people who are able to make that argument because more than about 2/3 of Americans are against the war. Donald Trump's approval rating is about that same level. Wars tend to get less popular over time because the cost becomes higher in lives, in safety, in economics. This one started off unpopular. And again, to be clear, started by a president who campaigned on affordability. He campaigned on immigration, which isn't very popular either.
He also campaigned on no foreign adventures.
Right. So take a look at the CNN SSRS poll. This was, I think, yesterday. His disapproval on the economy is 70%. So he campaigned on the economy, campaigned on immigration, and campaigned on no foreign wars. So I would say your argument is that the person at the gas station may not be the right person to opine on whether or not he should be doing what he's doing in the war. But in their mind, they elected a guy who was going to fix the economy and not get us into foreign wars. And now they're paying a tax on this. They're paying a price for this. So what do you make of it?
I'm going to make the mistake of trying to be subtle. Wish me luck.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So, yeah, I know. I'm just going to get in trouble. Look, what we heard from the video clips is a deep sense that the president doesn't care about people like me. And I understand why people feel that way, and I happen to think that he doesn't. And he hasn't explained what he's doing to people. Honestly, I think he's lazy. If you want to start a trade war, the first thing you do is you make the argument. You go to the American people, you explain it. If you want to start a war, you get behind the Resolute desk, you call the camera in, you look straight down the lens and you explain the case. Was it 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days before he bombed Iran, he had the State of the Union and spent more time talking about Joe Biden than Iran. This bloke literally has not tried to win the case. He hasn't. The reason he's losing the argument on the economy is he literally hasn't tried.
Right.
He hasn't said, here's the theory of the case. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what I'll do if it doesn't work. Just not at all.
Right.
So why do I think he doesn't care about folks like me? Because he gives no indication of doing so. And then we can add on the top that while being president, the bloke's literally become worth billions of dollars more with some of the dodgiest, shadiest nonsense we've ever seen. My favorite.
Super profitable for this guy.
Barron Trump is 19 years old and worth $150 million.
Yeah.
Do you know how many 19-year-olds are worth $150 million?
I don't know many 19-year-olds worth $1 million. So
it's statistically impossible to do based on talent. So either this bloke, coincidentally, is the smartest 19-year-old on the planet, or it's $150 million worth of graft and grift right there.
Right.
And that's before we get to the beautiful brothers.
Yeah.
Or the president himself. So,
or Witkoff's son, or whoever else. I mean, there's being on the outside of this party is not as much fun as being on the inside of it. I will say, for all our criticisms, if I were on the inside, I'd say you two guys are just sour grapes because you're not on the take.
Super sour.
We get this question a bit, and I want to bring it to you.
I just want to stick with it. This was the subtle bit.
Yeah.
Okay. We bombed Iran.
Yeah.
It's really serious stuff. There are people throughout the Middle East now who are homeless, who are fearful, who are all of that.
People, by the way, who had nothing to do with this. No matter what you think about all the parties involved, these are just regular people going about their lives.
And there's American military families terrified. They've got sons and daughters in the region. They don't know what's happening next. I have spent 6 weeks going on cable TV, and all anyone wants to ask me about is fuel prices.
Right.
The stakes are different.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the stakes. Let's be honest and adult and serious
Yes.
about this rather than like, oh, gas got expensive.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think why we're involved in a war because there are bad governments all over the world, and I would love if we were at the table and able to influence the world into being a better place. And sometimes that means sanctions. Sometimes it means deals like we did with Iran in 2015. A lot of people thought that was distasteful to get into a deal with them, but it actually prevented them from enriching uranium and making a nuclear bomb so that we wouldn't have to actually do this and people wouldn't be dead. There are lots of ways to deal with this.
Yep.
We seem to have chosen the ones that are outliers. I do want to ask a question that we keep getting, and I want to. Stephanie and I have strong views on this, but since we got an economist, I want to ask you. Printme at AOL.com says, what will happen to the economy if millions of Americans abruptly stop paying their credit card bills for a few months? Now, the last time we had this question, the context was as a protest to what the government is doing, like the No Kings or May 1st or whatever the case is. I have no idea what the context of this question is, whether this person's just asking what would happen if Americans don't, or whether it would be an effective protest. My view is no in both cases. In other words, the only people that get hurt by you not paying your credit card bill is you.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm just very impressed someone has an AOL.com email address. That's amazing.
Pretty retro, right?
That is cool. Imagine having to download, like stick the CD in every time you want to get your email.
The dial-up noise and all that.
That'd be great. Yeah, no, Ali, you're talking about very serious stuff. So what would happen if you could get everyone to not pay their credit cards? Probably something pretty interesting, probably not something very good. But here's the problem. You can go out and you can tell your mates, hey, I'm not going to pay my credit card bill. How about you don't pay yours? And it turns out you'll not pay your bill. You'll destroy your credit rating. And the other folks who said they'd do the same thing, they're not going to follow through.
Right.
In which case you lose. You haven't made a political point. And here's the part I really worry about. As much as I don't like high credit card interest rates and things like that, the only thing worse than having access to credit is not having access to credit.
Right.
You lose your job at the next recession. The thing about the credit card is even though they're charging you ungodly interest rates, you can still eat.
Right.
If you don't have the credit card, you can't eat. So I want you, every single person who's at home, maintain your credit rating. It's not an effective form of protest.
I'm with you on that. It is not an effective. The other thing is the credit card is stuff you bought already. So if you would like to protest by not eating at a particular restaurant or shopping at a particular place, totally, I'm all about that. I think you can do that if you want. You should probably make sure that the business that you're doing it to knows that you're protesting. Can
I point out, I just got an electric car. Do you reckon I got a Tesla?
I don't think so.
Freaking hope in hell.
Right. So that's good. And I hope when you buy them, you tell the people who from whom you bought the car. The protest is in making sure they know it. The problem is with the credit card, you've already bought the thing. So at that point, your choice not to pay it, which, by the way, would be an economic act, is going to hurt you, not them. The people you bought the stuff from are already getting their stuff. This concept of Donald Trump maybe not being too concerned about how people feel about things, he also makes the point that everything will be fine once the war ends. We're not sure what this war is about. We're not sure what ending it looks like. Does it mean opening up the Strait of Hormuz? Whatever the case is. But Mike Johnson was asked about this, and here's what by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, here's what he had to say.
As soon as that's resolved, I agree with the Treasury Secretary. I agree with the President. You're going to have an alleviation of the pain at the pump, and you're going to have prices come down overall. And we're very much looking forward to that. As you know, other economic indicators are going very, very well. The jobs numbers, unemployment numbers, the stock market, all these other factors. So as soon as we get gas prices back under control, we alleviate that pain.
So that's a great talking point that they use. You mentioned Pam Bondi. They do this all the time. And I want to know how true it is, right? Because the gas prices are prevalent because you see them. As you said, they're 6 feet tall. You see them all the time. You pay it. You know how much gas, generally speaking, you fill every week. Most people drive about the same amount every week, and they know they paid more. I don't know. Is it fair to say the economy's bad because I'm paying more for gas or more for food or whatever the case is? Because Mike Johnson just cited some other numbers that said unemployment's low, GDP is high, the stock market is high. Tell me more about this.
I think it depends what point you want to make. If the question is, can people in the United States eat? The answer is most people can and some people can't. If the question is, are we better off with gas prices being high or low? If you're someone who has a car, the answer is you're better off if they're low and you've got more money left at the end of the week. The Republican talking point that the war ends and gas prices plummet and everything goes back to normal is interesting because it's half right. There are two things that are true at the same time and they get confounded very easily. So let me try and explain. We can look at oil price futures. Remember, oil prices determine gas prices. A futures price is people buying and selling oil that will be delivered, say, in November, right? That would be the November oil price futures. And what we see is that futures price has risen dramatically because of the war. What that tells you is markets believe that gas will be higher than it otherwise would have been without the war, right? But the November oil price future didn't rise as much as today's oil price. So what that does say is markets expect there's some chance the war ends. When it does, some of the heat will come out, and they're right. Gas prices will come down, but they won't come down to where they were before the war. And so if the question is, how long am I going to be paying the bill of the war? The answer, according to futures prices, is 2, 3, 4 years. If the question is how long until they see prices start to fall, the answer is as soon as they clean something else up in the Middle East. They're just not going to come back to where we want them.
So there's a guy named Edward Fishman who wrote a book called Choke Points. It's really great. It's all about, generally speaking, about economics, but it's about things that people have that can be choke points, whether it's currency or whatever. And it was actually, a lot of it was written about the way the U.S. got Iran into the nuclear deal in 2015. But the Strait of Hormuz is a literal choke point. And from an economics perspective, my concern is that for all of history, it was kept open. Now Iran has recognized the weapon that it actually is, which seems perhaps more potent than whatever nuclear weapon Trump would have you think they were building, or missiles. And in fact, the Iranians, who like to troll Donald Trump on social media, keep talking about the degree to which Americans are frustrated that their prices are going up because of this war. But my worry is that if there's a ceasefire and a deal in 2 weeks, the fact is there is now a tool available. There is now a new choke point in the world, and I'm never sure how that's going to be used in the future.
I think you're wildly correct. So what this war has done is revealed something that was always there, which is that Iran always had this weird kink called the Strait. I think that's weird that you call a kink a strait, but that's fine. And that gave it enormous leverage. See right there. Who would look at that
and call that
a
strait? You're right. Yes, it's a kink.
It's not a strait. Yeah. Anyway,
that's going to make you go viral on social media, the kink of Hormuz.
Do not get me started. You'll get us both in trouble.
Yeah.
Look, the reality is, if Iran had somehow torn a hole in America's defense fabric, it would have created a vulnerability. That's just as expensive as it was there all along, but nobody realized, and now we realize. Which is, at the end of this war, it seems like Iran now has genuine leverage over the rest of the world in a profound way that it was not well understood before.
Right.
And by the way, we've seen this play before. Basically, what we had is we had the United States and the president acting as the 800-pound bully. We're just going to go over there and bully them. I think that they have to give in to us, neglecting the fact that we're in a highly interconnected world and discovering all of a sudden a new American vulnerability, in this case, the Strait of Hormuz. During the trade war, we saw this
literally
play.
A word that people didn't know. Nobody talked about the Strait of Hormuz. I was there when the deal went through, but in 2015, but nobody talked about the Strait of Hormuz. I told people I went to the Strait of Hormuz, and they're like, I went to like Rehoboth Beach.
Yeah,
so
it wasn't even in my favorite 6 straits.
That's right. Or kinks.
Dire Straits, that's a good straits.
Right.
So we saw this play out in the trade war. Remember, the president said, I'm just going to beat up the Chinese. What I'm going to do is levy tremendously high tariffs. He made the same mistake, and he failed to understand the interconnectedness of the world economy. And all of a sudden, we had to start using another new set of words, rare earth minerals. Yep. We went most of our lives not talking about rare earth minerals.
But like economics, we use rare earth minerals every day, our phones, our cars, but we don't think about them.
And the Chinese have a lot of them and we don't, which means that when it comes to trade, they've got us by the short and curlies.
Yeah.
And so actually, the United States today has 2 more substantial geopolitical vulnerabilities that were latent and not being used and possibly not even well understood.
Yes.
2 years ago. So we're actually we've attempted to bully the rest of the world, and we're substantially worse off as a result. And I think there really is a line that connects the two, which is in each of these cases, we're discovering the world is profoundly interconnected. And you might think you're the biggest puppy on town and no one else can hurt you, but if we're really interconnected, actually, there's all sorts of choke points and shortages and scarcities and so on that give everyone more leverage than you might otherwise think they have. So I hope the president doesn't decide to go and learn this a third time.
Right, with something that some latent thing that we weren't thinking about, that suddenly becomes a thing. I think he almost started that when he decided he was going to tariff penguins. It's like, who knew that penguins might be a threat to us? So there's a great question we got from Emma, which really speaks to the fundamentals of what economics are, right? It's not numbers and data and graphs. I want to hear what Emma has to say about this.
When will we stop fighting each other in this world over gas, money, greed, and land? When will it stop?
I mean, that could be economics, that could be politics, whatever it is, but it's what we do. We fight each other over limited resources. We want other people's things, or we want more of those things for ourselves.
Wow. Also, just what a beautiful sentiment. And
yeah,
don't you love young people?
Yes. Could they run the world? I would love it. Could they take over soon?
Yeah, it would be great. Hey, look, so let me give Emma actually a couple of very serious answers. So one, when people's lives are on the line, when they're starving, it's pretty easy to see why they'd fight over resources. So that then says economic development is one of the surest ways forward. Once we all have plenty, then the stakes feel a little bit lower. Second, she looks at the world and sees fighting everywhere. And viewed from one angle, she's right. An economist can also look at the world and see the beauty of cooperation everywhere. And he might be right too. So let me tell you, last night I had salmon for dinner. My salmon, I think, might have been caught off the seas of Norway. How did the Norwegian fishermen know that I wanted salmon? I had couscous with my salmon. It was probably grown by an Israeli farmer. How did someone in Israel know that I wanted that? And on it goes. My dinner plate required cooperation from people all around the world. And I don't know how and why they did it. Well, I do, the profit motive. But once you start to understand that economic life fundamentally is about cooperation, that changes things, right? So I walked into the bakery and I bought some bread, and you might say, oh, why are we fighting over the price of bread? We're not. The baker can do something I can't, and he helps me eat. That baker has a son or a daughter who's at the University of Michigan, and I can do something they can't, and I teach them economics. The world is beautiful, and it's based on cooperation. And actually, underneath the facade of it all, of what looks like competition, is this extraordinary degree of cooperation around the world. And this, by the way, I'm now going to bring it back to politics. This is the poverty of Donald Trump's worldview. If you think about the world purely as competition, you think about a fixed pie, if I win, you lose, in which case he wants to go and inflict damage on anyone else. This is Emma's question. Why do we fight? Well, the reason the president does is he thinks if he makes your slice smaller, he gets a bigger slice. But if the world's really about cooperation, together we cook the cake, we bake the pie, we make it bigger. That's, I think, a much more optimistic worldview. Both views are right. Now, let me come back and answer Emma's question one more way. One of the reasons I care so deeply about international trade is once we create this interdependence, where I make your life better off and you make my life better off.
We're less likely to break that chain. We're less likely to want to fight with each other, right? I'm less likely to want to have to, which is weird because we're trying real hard, it seems, to break some of these chains, including with my home country in Canada, right? Where we're fighting with somebody we have no reason to fight with. But the resistance to that fight amongst Canadians and Americans is there. They want to go back to trading with each other and being friends with each other and helping bake that cake together.
Absolutely. How else am I going to get maple syrup on my pancakes apart from hanging out with my friendly Canadians?
That's right.
And so that's why I don't want to bomb Canada, because I like pancakes. And it's actually a serious point.
But your point is valid. Like these are, when you are getting something you like from another country, or they're buying something from you and you're making money off of it, your tendency to want to go to war, and this is all through history, right?
Even more deeply, which is to trade with them, someone often meets, and we come to see each other as more human. Turns out, Canadians do all sorts of weird stuff, but I've come to meet some of them and actually kind of like them. And that connection, which might have come about through commerce, I went to buy my maple syrup, actually showed us one humanity. And by the way, I just want to say, Emma for president. Tell me when you're running, Emma. I will be your chief economic
I agree.
advisor.
Don't listen to all the naysayers who tell you how bad it is. There's much more good than bad, and I think that's an important takeaway in the moment. So, what people ask you this all the time, including me, and I'm going to ask you again tonight because you're going to join me on The Last Word at 10 p.m. There is some sense that we don't like some of the things this administration has been doing as it relates to trade, as it relates to Iran, as it relates to immigration, as it relates to lots of things. We're finding this as a commonly held view through our polling. But you're not actually a pessimist about where we are going forward.
No. Sometimes that's just how you choose to live your life. Sometimes it's just from look around you, mate. The world's an extraordinary place. Every day we get to look outside and see beautiful trees and beautiful flowers. Every day I get to hug my children. Every day we have the opportunity to make the world a better place. You and I right now are at one of the most extraordinary moments in human history. We've cured diseases. We have long life expectancies. You and I are not hungry, although too many people are. And I want to help people maybe, losing hope means losing too much. We can't give away hope.
Right.
And so a compartmentalization that I like to think about is the world, if you actually think about it, it's not as good as we want it to be, but it's an amazing place. This is, life expectancies have never been longer. So many material conditions have never been better. But the debate is about, could it be better still?
Yeah.
And to the extent that we fall short of our potential, let's fight about it and let's be fierce about it and let's get in there with our best analysis and our best arguments. But let's also accept the reality, which is, people used to die in their 30s. People used to be hungry. People used to losing a spouse during childbirth or losing a child during childbirth. We're an important part of the human condition for so long, and we are so insulated and so fortunate to be so insulated. We're the richest country at the richest moment in all of human history. That can be true, and so we can maintain our joy and want to do better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Justin, it is great to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this. We've learned a lot. Thank you for answering a lot of our viewers' questions. We'll do that. We'll do it more often. And thank you for the platypus.
Yeah, mate. Look at that.
And of course, the great book. And I'll see you tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. Now, as you know, I do this show at 10 p.m. Eastern, usually on Fridays, but Lawrence is away, so I'm doing it a lot. But in the middle of June, I'm going to move. Stephanie's moving out of her slot at the 11th hour. She's going back to where she started, which is at 9 in the morning. Ironically, a lot of people don't know this, but when I joined this network, I started at 11 p.m. So I'm going back to the 11th hour at 11 p.m. starting the middle of June. So Stephanie and I will still come together every Wednesday to do this conversation and to have to take your questions. We love doing this. It'll be the end of her day and the beginning of mine. We'll do it. We'll do it starting June 15th. But starting June 15th, that's the move that we're making. And of course, send your emails to us all week. Velshi Rule at ms.now. Velshi Rule at ms.now. Justin, I'll see you tonight at 10 p.m. Thank you for being with us, and thanks to all of you for being with us this afternoon.
Take care.